Welcome everybody here and watching on our live stream to the second night of faculty readings of the 49th Appalachian Writers Workshop. We've had a great day on campus. I hope everybody's having a good time, is feeling inspired, and feeling the power of community that this place is so renowned for. I want to start with this. As many of you know, wow. Sorry. 4 years ago tonight, on July 27th and into the morning of July 28th, the Writers' Workshop and surrounding communities experienced what the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration declared a 1,000-year flood. It had been raining for days and continued heavy throughout the night, and in the early morning hours, the waters crashed through these buildings, this town, and the counties around us. Of our 88 attendees, over 60 were lodging on campus. Many had to flee to higher ground. Wow, I was okay. I love you all. That would be great. Thank you, Marion.
Of our 88 attendees, over 60 were lodging on campus, and many had to flee to higher ground. They had to wait until the sun rose and the water receded to assess the damage and evacuate. A dozen of our riders lost their vehicles and personal belongings. We were incredibly lucky that no person was lost on campus, although 45 people died in the flood, and 22 of those here in Knott County. And over the following months and years, countless more lives were impacted. The riders lodging here on campus, those commuting in, and those watching in happened from afar. Those watching it from afar were all heartbroken and traumatized, and the response from this community and beyond is one of the most beautiful things I will ever witness in my life. Me too, all of us. I'd like to hold a moment of silence for all of you in this room and for those who are not, who fled from the water, and for all of you in this room and those who are not, who watched it unfold from safe, dry places, for the survivors who lost so much tangible and intangible, for the dead, for the loved ones of the dead, especially to the parents of the noble family who lost all 4 of their children, for the volunteers who donated time, supplies, money, physical labor, love, and support, for everyone who still gets anxious at nighttime rain. I want to hold a minute on this night to remember our disaster, to remember Helene and others, including the terrible flooding last week in West Virginia. I want to send love to everyone affected, to those who are not here, and especially I want to fill this room with love to everyone affected who are here with us tonight.
Thank you. All right, we are excited about our 4 readers this evening, so without further ado, I'd like to call up Rick Childers.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here with you all, and it is a privilege to introduce Jim Minick. Jim Minick is really something special, someone special, you might say. I first met him in 2023 in David Joy's workshop, and that was quite the experience. Ever since then, and at least until today, Jim has been a joy and a pleasure. I really want to share this photo that I think sums Jim up well. If you meet him, he'll pull you in, he'll have you grinning ear to ear, and you might end up appreciating the world around you, whether stooped on the side of a hill on the way up to Priest, or through his trail cam photos, get on his email list and get some of those photos, they're really good. But all jokes aside, Jim is one of our most respected, like I said, just a joy to be around, one of our most prolific veterans in this riding community, both here in Appalachia and abroad. And he's got a smile as long as a good snood. Jim Minick.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you all to the Heinemann staff, and thank you all to the audience for being here. It's a great honor. Whew. And I was so surprised and glad that Melissa did what she just did. So it's a great honor to be here as a student as well as a faculty. The first time I was a student was 1998. The first time I was a faculty, I think, was 2011. And I shared this stage with Gurney Norman that night. And so let's remember the people who have gone on that have shaped us. And let's remember the people who are coming after us by raising some money, all right? So this is a hooked rug that my wife made probably 25 years ago or so. It's been on our house walls for all that time, and it's time for it to find a new home. So it will be part of the silent auction along with some knitted scarves that she has made. So it'll all be downstairs, and there's a bunch of other great things down there, so I encourage you to bid, all right? Just don't bid on the Blanco glass vase. All right, so if I budget my time right tonight, I'm going to be hopefully reading 4 different pieces from 3 different books in 3 different genres, and on the surface it'll appear that they have nothing in common. But underneath, I hope you'll see that, and this is about resilience, is about carrying on. And so the first book is Without Warning, The Tornado of Udall, Kansas, and it is about a tornado that happened May 25th, 1955 at 10:35 p.m. in this little town called Udall. In roughly 3 minutes, a tornado, an F5 tornado, which we don't have the tools to measure the speed of a tornado yet. That's how fast it is. They destroy all the instruments. So anywhere from over 200 to over 300 miles an hour winds. So an F5 tornado went through this small town of 600 people in roughly 3 minutes. It destroyed almost all the buildings, including a new high school, toppled the water tower, it turned railroad cars over on their sides, and it killed 83 people and injured 270. So over half of the community was either injured or killed. And so I want to tell you about one of the survivors. His name was Bobby Atkinson. He was 15 at the time, a rising junior in high school. The school was very small, so he was both the starting pitcher and the starting quarterback, and honor student, straight A student. so the night of this tornado, the weather report said it was clear. There was no tornado warning, even though it was still raining severely outside. And most of the people had already gone to bed. And Bobby lived with his parents and 2 younger brothers, and right in town in a small house. And he stayed up to watch the 10 o'clock news with his father, and then went to bed. But he couldn't get to sleep because of the sound outside so much. And so when the air conditioner blew across the inside of the living room and the house shook, Bobby dove out the window and ducked down beside the foundation. And I'll read a short section of that. To Bobby Atkinson, it felt like 2 tornadoes. The first one, probably the front wall of the tornado, blew over him with a great force, wind strong enough to rip off his clothes. But there was little debris with it, and he wasn't badly injured. And then the wind stopped. There was noise, but not on top of him. He got on his knees to look around. The house was gone, just simply gone. Lightning illuminated the empty foundation, the splintered and leafless trees. Where were his parents, his brothers? He didn't hear their voices. He didn't hear any voices. After a few moments, the eye of the tornado moved to the northeast, and the rear wall of the funnel slammed into him. To Bobby, it felt like somebody shooting a shotgun at close range right at him over and over, while someone else kept hitting him with a baseball bat. Something pummeled his head, then both arms. Something else stabbed his back and stayed there. Then a rock or brick, some hurled object, hit him on the back of the head. Then only darkness. So after who knows how long, he regained consciousness and was able to crawl to his father's car, which was nearby, so it didn't get blown away, but all the windows were shattered, so there was glass all over the seats. And it was still raining very hard, even though the tornado moved on, and it was hailing, massive hail. And so he got out of the storm into this car, and he waited, hoping somebody would come rescue him. Nobody came. And after, I don't know how many hours, maybe 2 hours, he saw headlights at the far edge of town, roughly a half mile away, and he realized he needed to rescue himself. So he didn't, he knew he was injured, but he didn't know at the time, but he had a broken leg, 2 broken arms, his hand was crushed, he had some pretty bad concussions, he had debris all over his, embedded in his body, including a 2x2 board that had punctured his back and broken ribs and punctured a lung and kidneys. So he had to crawl, right? I mean, all these injuries and half a mile to go, and that half a mile used to be his town, but now it's all debris. So he made it. He made it. And after a couple hours, he got to the edge of town where the headlights were. People had come to search, help search, and pointed their cars inward because, it helped with that lighting. And he got to the edge of the town, and there was this guy there he knew. His parents ran a small grocery store in town, and this was a friend of the family who came and shopped at the grocery, a farmer. And he had a brand new 1955 Buick, and Bobby loved cars. And the guy opened the door and said, "Come on, get in, I'll take you to town." He had come to town, I'll take you to the hospital. He said he had come to town to find and rescue his daughter, who sat in the back seat. And so he said, "Come on, get in the car." And Bobby looked at the car, looked at himself. "I'm not getting in that car." He didn't want to get it all bloody. And the guy looked at him and said, "Get in that car before I beat your ass." And so he did, and he still had this board sticking out, And he only had the waistband of his underwear on. And he got into the back seat. The young woman was over there as well, and she pulled a towel off the side of her head and said, "I lost my ear in the tornado." And he said, "I'm sorry to hear that." And she said, "You're not looking too good yourself." And then so he held on to the front of the seat in front of him because he couldn't sit back, and he watched the speedometer get pegged, and he thought he was going to die again. But they made it to Winfield, 17 miles away, and he is still alive. But both of his brothers died that night, and his mother died a few days later from the tornado injuries, and the three of them were buried together. And then his father was so mangled by the tornado that he was unrecognizable, but he survived the tornado, but he had cancer before, and he died 6 months later. So Bobby was an orphan. So resilience, right? Resilience. So that's Without Warning. That's nonfiction. All right, so lighter stuff. We're switching to fiction. This is the novel Fire Is Your Water. It's about a healer who loses her ability to heal, and it's mainly third-person point of view, close third between the two main human characters, male and female. However, I learned as I was writing this that the male character rescues a raven on the front here. And I learned as I was writing this that the raven learned English and wanted to speak. So there are short sections throughout the book where the raven Cicero speaks, and it's in first bird point of view. All right? And actually, I have this memory of walking in. I was in the dinner line with Darnell Arnold here 15 years ago at least, and she was familiar with this, and I just said, I'm really afraid of letting this bird talk. And she said, well, maybe it's time. And so this is Cicero's Meditation on a Feather, and he was injured. He had a broken wing, and yet, so when this happens, he has not yet been recovered. Think about it. A feather is such a simple thing, all lightness and what looks like frill, all of it attached to a hollow bone. If you hold it to the light, you can almost see through that bone. Hard to believe what a feather can do. And don't you forget what a feather used to do. It wrote your words, lots of them, letters spilling over pages, all of it for you, you thankless crooks. Your forefathers plucked it from some hapless goose and called it a quill. Then they used it to write your Declaration of Independence. Yet there they were, dependent on a lowly feather to sign all their names. Poor goose. What's her name? But enough of that. When I preen, I run my bill over each dibble and nub, each separate flange. I can feel the pockets of possibility, the way they all knit together to form one dark strand. And I realize that a feather is a flame with a spine and ribs. Or maybe a feather is a black one anyway, is the ghost of a flame. Like you're sitting around a campfire at night staring at that space between each flicker. There a flicker disappears, and that space of emptiness becomes a black feather full of stars. So a feather is just a spark to ignite the air. My God of all wrinkled mountains, I can't wait to fly again. Thank you. All right, so two poems. The first one's from my latest book of poetry, The Intimacy of Spoons. And so when I was 19, I was in a very bad accident where I was burned severely. And I wrote it in an essay 25 years ago, and then I used that story as a part of the novel. So I wrote it in fiction, and I thought I was done with it. And then this poem came out, just kind of appeared. So this is called Good Dirt. Already I have tasted fire. Tongue to tongue I've licked its heat and flame, smelled hair singed in my nose. Already I've heard the pop of skin after it blistered. Such pain I did not know until the nerves went numb from the bright explosion. Let me tell you, fire's deepest secret is a heart that has no color, and in that heart the rumble and roar disappear. When I die, the tongues will lick me again, only more fully, and only after my spirit has already leapt. Ashes from bone make good dirt. And the last one is also a poem, and this is brand spanking new, like a month old. And it's going to be coming out, if it's not already coming out, or come out in the online journal As a Crow Flies, which is the online journal of Appalachian Journal. And I've been working on a novel for 5 years now that has a lot of people from the queer community. And so I've been reading a lot of queer theory and stories and memoirs to try to understand that. And so this poem has come out of that. And so it's for my queer friends, which since none of us is really straight anyways, that's all of us, okay? All right? Them mountains, them me. As a crow flies and milkweed seeds rise, as otter slides and speckled trout glides, lines from here to there are never straight. Space is never square. The horizon is always queer. Where is straightness in anyone? Certainly not the curving river of our spines or folded tectonic plates of our glutes, not in our wind-wild whiskers or the flora-filled caverns of our bellies, not in our spark-snapping synapses or that wave-pulsing organ we call the heart. So queerness in me, in the odd ways I am in this world, my hermit contrariness of staying home, growing too many pumpkins, wanting to kettle like a kestrel and crow like a crow. Queerness in this desire to listen to people, yes, and also to white oaks and winter wrens and them mountains that have come closer. This singular, multitudinous way of being. Thank you all.
Denali, Nalamalapu, lives in Southwest Virginia, has previously lived in Southern Maine, and also has lived in Southern India. So they are really good on the South. Except in India, where the South is kind of in the North because of the equator. Denali studied English literature at Bates College and completed a Fulbright grant in Malaysia. Denali has worked as a climate communicator an organizer since 2019. They're friends with our friend Raye and their many goats. In fact, I have been told they want to dedicate this reading to a particular goat named Buttercup. They draw pictures in their own style of other people's book covers and post them on the internet just to be nice. They play basketball, they know who Edith Bunker is, and they know how wise Edith is. They are the author of Holler, a graphic memoir of rural resistance, which, according to one award-winning illustrated novelist, which is me, is a thrilling breakthrough in the use of oral history in graphic storytelling. Will you please make welcome Denali Nalamalapu.
That's all. That was the reading. Every time I see Rob, I try not to tell him he's one of my favorite writers in the entire world. So don't tell Rob that. But seriously, I'm so honored to be here. And Jim Minick is one of the reasons why I'm here, and so is Mandy. So I just really appreciate it. I, as Rob said, am not from here. So it's amazing to be welcomed into the place where I live. I definitely struggled a lot in Maine to find a sense of belonging. I'm crying because of Rob, not because of belonging in Maine. Or maybe both. I wrote that book that Rob mentioned. It's here. It's a graphic novel. As many people will ask, yes, I did write it and I did draw it. I didn't just write it and then leave out the artist because I was so egotistical that I wanted all of the credit, which is what I like to think people are really asking me when they ask me if I drew it as well. As mentioned, I am a climate organizer, which means something to some people and absolutely nothing to other people. One time I Googled what an organizer is in the general world and got an ad for the Container Store. I did. So I'm trying to retire the word organizer, but there's not a great other word. But I spend a lot of time trying to communicate to people about climate change, and that's in part because I'm from the coast of southern Maine that's very impacted by climate change, and I'm from southern India that is impacted by climate change in very different ways. And now I live in southwestern Virginia that is impacted by climate change in very different ways. So I'm very familiar with all the different ways one can be impacted by climate change, although now that I'm saying it, so are all of us at this point. But I moved to southwestern Virginia because I built a robust community of pipeline fighters as my friends. How many of you all have heard of the Mountain Valley Pipeline? Okay, like maybe 30%. That's reasonable. The Mountain Valley Pipeline is a 303-mile-long fracked gas pipeline, which goes from northern West Virginia, all through West Virginia, and then through southwest Virginia, where I now live, and then into northern North Carolina. It exists for many reasons, some fabricated, including to power data centers, which some of y'all might have heard of, to export gas, which is a rumor, and also to power our homes, also a rumor. So I worked in that fight with my community for about 4 years, but the community fought that pipeline for 10 years. And I was working in the fight, trying to communicate what we were doing in the mountains of West Virginia and Southwest Virginia. And a couple pipeline fighters and I decided to take a vacation where all we talked about was fighting pipelines, which if you know any activists will sound very familiar. We're quite a depressing bunch. So we went to our friend's vacation home in northern North Carolina, which his wife had decorated in like farmhouse chic, but it was seaside chic. And I sat on one of those weeping chairs, like where the ladies weep, and thought about how had we not communicated about how to fight a pipeline or why we're fighting a pipeline. And what came to mind in part was comics and graphic novels. And I started drawing when I was quite small, and likely have not gone a day without drawing. Although sometimes when I say that, I'm like, you probably have. There's probably a day where you had COVID and you didn't draw. But generally speaking, since no one is monitoring me at that level yet, I could say I've drawn every day of my life. So I thought, okay, so I write for a living and I write a lot about the pipeline. Why don't I draw it too? So we sat down at the dining table underneath the sea stars, and we talked about all the people who fought the pipeline, all through West Virginia, through Virginia, and into North Carolina. As you all know, it is such a vulnerable thing to tell your stories, and not everyone wants to, so we also talked about who are people that are likely to want to tell their story. And diversity is very important to me, which includes age diversity, geographic diversity. A lot of the pipeline fight had a focus in Virginia, in part because the state of Virginia has a lot of resources, people live a little closer together, so it was very important to me that West Virginia was represented in the book, because the pipeline, if we're being honest, is mostly in the state of West Virginia. And then I wanted to, as much as possible, dispel this idea that Appalachia is, and always has been, just white. So having as much racial diversity was important to me. So that gives you a sense of the pipeline, the people, why I wrote it. Sometimes I forget key details. The one that I forget is it is nonfiction. Sometimes people ask me if I made up these stories. What I did forget to tell you is we lost. After 10 years of fighting the pipeline, we got super, super close to winning, and by winning I mean stopping the pipeline, in my opinion. I didn't tell you why we want to stop the pipeline. Sometimes I assume these things. We wanted to stop the pipeline for many, many reasons. One reason is methane gas is a major polluter of the planet. Another reason is many landowners along the route did not, in fact, want a massive pipeline in their backyard, because that often means trees getting cut down, you can't step onto part of your land, you might not want an explosive pipeline that's constantly leaking methane gas into the air right next to your land. It also crossed thousands of streams and rivers. I bet all of us like clean water, so that is kind of a uniting reason why we didn't want the pipeline. So that gives you a bit of a smattering of reasons. There are many more. But ultimately we lost, and the reason why we lost is our dear self-professed climate president, Joseph Biden, decided that he would acquiesce to our dear coal baron senator, Joe Manchin, and they made a deal that if some really historic, amazing climate legislation were to go through, the pipeline had to too. So it was this really weird moment as a climate activist where I was so mad at this guy who was the first person to ever say he was a climate president. I'm always mad at Joe Biden, at Joe Manchin, so that wasn't new. And then also the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is really historic, amazing climate legislation. So that gives you a bit of a sense of the end times. But I wrote this book because I think it is important to talk about struggles that we didn't win, especially when we're up against so much and likely will not win every single struggle we fight. Okay, the first chapter I would like to read from is the first of 6 chapters that profile the lives of 6 pipeline resistors through the lens of skills that they brought to the struggle that activated them. So I'm really interested in like why do people go from their homes and their comfort to being activated and taking a role in movements. So with this book, each character or person, real life living person, has a skill that they took into the movement. So you'll learn tonight from Paula, who's in chapter 1, and then Desiree Shelley, who's in the final chapter of the book. Okay, I will begin reading now. Chapter 1, Paula Mann. When I was young, my mommy and I would walk through these woods, and she would teach me about the plants and the critters that lived here. She taught me how to identify bloodroot, jack-in-the-pulpit, honeysuckle, chipmunks. We would stop and rest under a big tree, listening to the birds chirp and the wind blow. Now that tree is gone. The MVP destroyed the forest to make way for their pipeline. A part of the land is gone, and with it, a part of me. Not only do I live here, but I grew up here, and so did my mom, after her daddy started the farm. So how did you first find out about the pipeline? Well, one day, my nephew Maury came knocking. Hello there, Aunt Paula, Uncle Herman. Hey there, Maury. Woo. There's going to be a big pipeline coming through. Oh Lord, we don't want that. No, we sure don't. I heard they're having an informational meeting in town. Let's check them out then. From the start, we knew we couldn't trust MVP. We kept asking them about the need for and safety of the pipeline, but they wouldn't give us a straight answer. I knew they were hiding things from us. They made everything seem simple and golden. They barely talked about the impacts of the pipeline. When I learned about the destruction the pipeline would cause, I decided to use my photography skills to document the potential impacts. I set out looking for dangers like steep slopes where landslides happen, because that could lead to a deadly pipeline explosion. It was me, Herman, and my dog, Rusty. Rusty came everywhere with us, over Peters Mountain and through Monroe County, on the proposed pipeline route and then the alternate route, through all the seasons. He would yank us up these mountains until he got tired and started lagging behind. Rusty was known as Rusty the Wonder Dog. I love my doggies. Come here, sweeties. All 3 of them. But back then, it was just us and Rusty. As we walked together, we saw that the route ran through boulders and aquifers that supply the county with water. They're that bad at planning. It was terrifying to imagine a reckless company ramming a huge pipe through this land. And you know what worried me most? The pipeline crossed the Jefferson National Forest. I grew up playing in those woods and streams. I didn't want to see them destroyed for future kids. So I took pictures of the places it would cross. I showed the pictures to the Forest Service. They were shocked about what was at stake and angry. They agreed with me about the danger of MVP's plans. So because of the evidence you gathered, the Forest Service made MVP change their plans? That small win helped you keep fighting against the odds. Yes, this experience encouraged me to keep using my skills to expose the dangers of extractive projects. There's something so magical about that. Ordinary people traversing the ground they love to gather the evidence needed to keep their neighbors safe. Can you imagine if more people turned their love of the land into action? I don't know, do I have time for one more? Oh, I can read it fast. Okay, this is Desiree Shelley, chapter 6. When I imagine my children's future, I see them living in their ancestral homeland. I see them revitalizing their native language. Growing resilient seeds by planting them year after year. Reestablishing the bonds of our lifeways and listening to their ancestors. We need more place-based communities that protect land and water. Why place-based? Because if you're not connected to the land you live on, you might not fight as hard to protect it. My kids and grandkids will learn about our culture, language, and food as they reclaim our land. How did you learn to think this way? Well, it was a journey. I grew up in Baltimore. I love my city, but something was missing from my life. I felt like I had been searching for so long. What were you seeking? My community. I'm mixed and indigenous, from the Monican Nation and white, mostly of Polish descent. When I was growing up, I used to visit Appalachia. Whenever I visited the places my ancestors lived, I felt at home. I could feel their presence here. These experiences helped shape my identity and my desire to honor my ancestors. So my family and I moved to Catawba Valley in Roanoke County to be closer to my community and in my ancestral homeland. We call ourselves the people of the hills. My ancestors lived all over these mountains. We share language and culture with other Yesa people, including the Tutelo, Saponi, and Occaneechi. We lived in towns and villages along the James, Roanoke, Dan, and Haw rivers. We lived in the Blue Ridge Mountains and valleys, and the Piedmont parts of West Virginia, Virginia, and central North Carolina. When I moved here, I realized this is where I belong. By reincorporating our native traditions into my life, I grew increasingly connected to the land. When I moved to Catawba, we were already organizing against the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Wow, what a terrible way to be welcomed back to your ancestral homeland. Yeah, further destruction of this land by the fossil fuel industry. After I moved here, I immediately wanted to get involved in the fight. It must have been hard to balance that activism with everything else you have going on. Yes, settling into a new home, working, and caring for two soon-to-be 3 kids. I found out that the MVP route crosses indigenous burial mounds. I went to Bent Mountain and saw an Eastern Siouan burial mound like those built by the Yesa people. Bent Mountain is such a special place. I felt something when I was on Bent, this strong connection, even though I'd never been there before. I knew I had to fight this pipeline even though it doesn't cross the land I live on. In your journey from Baltimore to Catawba, you discovered how interconnected place and self are. And now my kids are part of me, so it is even more important for me to care for this place for them. Yeah, especially with climate change getting worse. If we don't stop these pipelines and care for our planet, my kids and kids' kids will experience the worst of it. Imagine if we made all our decisions based on how they could impact future generations. MVP would be completely out of the question. Thank you.
Good evening. I have had the great good fortune to know Christopher Rowe for going on a decade now. How about that? Any better? Yes, no, maybe? All right. One of the first introductions to him was through the character of Kay Lynn, who is the titular character in his story, The Contrary Gardener, which is the first story in this collection, Telling the Map. And on that first introduction, I hopped on a bus with Kay Lynn on the first Friday of May, braving Derby traffic on a trip to the county extension office to pick out crops for the next planting season, and also navigate the treacherous shoals of self-aware robots, rabid anti-AI partisans that want to conscript her into maximizing crop yields for horticultural munitions, but still also managing to drink a really fine mint julep under the glow of the Derby balloons. And I thought, I have found one of my people. So I kept on reading, and fortunately, Christopher is the author of multiple novels, novellas, short story collections. His work has been published in practically every notable speculative fiction publication out there, and has been a finalist for the Hugo, the Nebula, World Fantasy Award, Theodore Sturgeon Award, among others. And Christopher writes stories that are fantastic and fabulous in both the modern and archaic meanings of both of those words. And he grounds them in a place that we know, while also opening them up to worlds that are all his own. Or, as Kirkus Reviews says in a blurb on the back of Telling the Map, Rowe's stories are rooted in Kentucky, but he's also often inventing a society out of whole cloth. Complex, persuasive visions of an alternative South. So now, I know Christopher's alternative South started down the road a bit in Adair County, Kentucky, on his family's beef cattle farm, where he continues to this day after various vocational and avocational exiles in other parts of the world. He is an avid fan of the international cycling scene and the Oxford English Dictionary. And he counts among his more recent accomplishments getting the bull back in and identifying a local coterie of Methodist Warhammer enthusiasts that he is itching to cultivate. He would also like me to let anyone with Wikipedia editing privileges know that they are more than welcome to change that god-awful photo. So please help me welcome Christopher Rowe.
I'm going to read the story in this collection that is least like what those she described. We were talking last night, some of us, about readerly perceptions of genre fantasy fiction, and I would like to let my favorite poet in a hat know that this story was written as a genre fantasy story and published in a genre fantasy anthology. It is called The Force Acting on the Displaced Body. The little creek behind my trailer in Kentucky is called Frankham Branch. I had to go to the courthouse to find that out. Nobody around here thought it had a name. but all the little creeks and branches in the world have names, even if nobody remembers them or remembers which Franklin they're named after. I wanted to know the name when I was planning the trip back to Paris. Paris is in Bourbon Kings, not Paris is in Bourbon County. I was writing out my route, and Franklin Branch was step one. Couldn't afford to fly, so I was going by boat. I didn't have a boat, so I was going to build one. I was drinking a lot of wine around then. I saved the corks. Before I decided to go back to Paris, I considered using the bottles to build some sort of roadside tourist attraction. I looked into it a little bit, but the math defeated me very quickly. You remember how I am with math. A boat built out of corks, that turned out to be easy. All you need is a roll or two of cheesecloth and some thread and a needle and, of course, a whole lot of corks. I put it together in a long afternoon in the field behind the trailer. None of the bottles, full or empty, would break on the corks, so I never did christen it. I'd be happy to hear your suggestions for a name, though. You're always good at that. The neighbors had that party, set up the game to name the new kitten Calliope, you suggested, and nobody else even came close. You didn't go to the party, though. I carried over the note you'd written. Franklin Branch. That's a pretty good name. Even if I couldn't track the provenance, I know there are Franklins around here. No, they have been here for a long time. Probably a particular Franklin, sure. But here's a case where ignorance is kind of liberating. Since I don't know, since nobody knows, not even the people at the courthouse, it could have been a man or a woman, an old lady or a little boy. It could be named after all the Franklins. The boat behaved at first. It rolled down the hill and settled into the branch, stretching out long because the stream bed is so narrow. I waited for it. It waited for me to throw my bags in and to clamber in myself, and then I headed down the stream. I only moved at the speed the water moved. I only went as fast as the world would carry me. How far is my trailer from Sulphur Creek? See, that's a more interesting question than it might seem. There are so many ways to measure it. If I walk out my front door and follow Creek Bend Drive to the end of my landlord's farm, down into the bottom and across Franklin, up another hill, and then back down to where the blacktop turns to gravel, it's about 2 miles. That's the closest place, I think, where the road breaks up into gravel is where Franklin Branch flows into Sulphur Creek. But there are other ways I can go. I can walk through the fields, cross the branch on rocks at a narrow place, climb through some woods. I think it might only be about 1.5 miles that way. Then there are crows, Jim. As the crow flies, do you think that means that crows are supposed to fly in straight lines? Maybe they used to. I watch crows, and I don't think I'd trust them to give me advice on distance. I don't think I trust crows or creeks either on much of anything, except to be themselves. Finally, there's time. Nobody ever gives distances in miles anymore, but it's not because they've switched to metric. They measure how far it is from here to there with their watches, not their odometers. That place, that confluence of water and roads both, it's about 2 miles from my trailer. It's about 1.5 miles. It's about an hour if you take Franklin Branch in a boat made out of corks. So then I was on Sulphur Creek, which is broader than Franklin. The boat rounded itself up into a little donut. I smelled the waters in the creek, and I tasted it, searching for rotten eggs, I guess, or hell. The sulfur must have washed away, though. Sometimes that happens. Things wash away and only the names are left. My hometown, the town I lived closest to growing up and the one I live closest to again, it's an island, maybe. At the edge of town, you have to cross a bridge over Russell Creek. At every edge of town, every road leading in and out passes over Russell Creek. When I was younger, I thought that meant that the creek flowed in a circle. I'd seen illustrations of the sticks in my mythology books. It's not, of course. The creek and the town are neither than circles. And the roads don't lead out in perfect radials along the cardinal direction, something else I used to believe. What's the difference between a creek and in a river. Length, just length. Nothing about how much water flows through it, nothing about breadth or depth. In Kentucky, if a rivulet you can step across is at least 100 miles long, then it's a river. Russell Creek is 99 miles long. Maybe it's the longest creek in the world. When I floated out onto it, I started thinking that maybe I should have dug a trench somewhere at the headwaters and made a long oxbow at the bottom. Maybe instead of building a boat, I should have lengthened Russell Creek. But then it would just be a short river. Russell Creek flows around the town and beneath the bluffs that line one side of my family's farm, and then winds through the county to the Green River. The Green River pretty much named itself. The Green is deep and swift above the first locks and dams, then shallow and tamed below. Floating through the impounded lake at the county line, the boat began to misbehave. It didn't want to leave town after all. It bunched up in a tight little sphere. I bounced on the top, netting my nylon bags filled with wine bottles and this notebook and a corkscrew into the cheesecloth so they wouldn't drop down and disturb the muskies. Then the boat stretched out, became narrower and narrower, longer and longer, so it almost looked like it was floating forward. But I could tell it wasn't really moving, so I tried to paddle for a while with my hands. I kept getting pushed back by the wakes of the fishing boats headed for the state dock. When I gave up, exhausted, the boat finally shuddered or shrugged and drifted on through the spillway, through the dam. I don't know the motive force of the boat. Its motivation is a mystery to me. You have to keep an eye on that boat. Then it was a John Prine song for 300 miles. Here's a true story. The Commonwealth of Kentucky owns the Ohio River, or used to. We still own most of it, but then counties along the South Bank started charging property taxes to the Hoosiers and the Buckeyes who built docks off the North Shore. The Hoosiers and the Buckeyes got their states to sue ours, and theirs won a little bit. Now, the Commonwealth owns the Ohio River except for a strip 100 yards wide along the upper bank. The Supreme Court of the United States decided that. Those counties should not have tried to charge the taxes. They should have known what would happen. There doesn't seem to be much point in owning most of a river. These are things I saw along the Ohio River. Below Henderson, where the green gets muddied into the brown, I saw the carcass of a cow, bloated and rotting, floating in the shallows outside the main current. The boat shied away from it, even though I was curious to see what kind of cow it was. At Owensboro, the water became as clear as air, and I felt like I was flying for a little while. The bed of the Ohio is smooth and broad at Owensboro, unsullied by anything but giant catfish and a submerged Volvo P1800 in perfect condition. Ralph Stanley was playing a concert on the waterfront of Paducah. This time I didn't mind the boats dawdling. At Cairo, I floated onto the Mississippi. Cairo is pronounced Cairo. That works better, I don't know. Mark Twain's mother was born in my hometown. She was married in the front room of the big brick house at the corner of Fortune and Guardian. Mark Twain was conceived there. No. Samuel Clemens was conceived there. I think Mark Twain was conceived in San Francisco. Doesn't Mississippi mean father of waters? That's a great name. In the original and in the translation and in the parlance, you could make a career on that, I think. Father of waters. If I'd made that up, I would have lorded it over all the other neighbors for the rest of my life. I would never have named another river. So, past New Orleans, the first place I was tempted to stop but didn't, and into the Gulf of Mexico. The discharge of the Father forced me all the way to the Gulf Stream, and it's easy to cross an ocean when the currents are doing all the work. The boat was showing a little bit of wear, though, and to drink some more wine and patch a few places with the corks. It was around then, south of Iceland maybe, north of the Azores, that it occurred to me that I could have used all those bottles to make a boat instead of the corks. it might have been sturdier, and I could have probably found some waterproof glue. I think you would have thought of that at the beginning. But me, I was south of Iceland, very wet and cold before I hit my forehead with the fetal heel of my palm. Bottles, I said. The French, in naming rivers and cities and forests and Greek sandwich shops, have the advantage of being French speakers. I only know how to say, I don't speak French in French, but I say it with perfect pronunciation and a great deal of confidence. Nobody in France ever believed me. Sometimes even I didn't believe me. So I don't know what sin means, and I'm actually a little bit unsure of the pronunciation. I kept my mouth shut through the whole Pastor on. France was the first place along the trip that other people noticed the boat. The French love boats. I know what you think about that kind of sweeping comment. It's true, though, in all its implications. All French people love all boats, even ones made out of corks. They might not like them, all of them, all of the time, but love, sure. Do you remember when we were on a boat on the scene together? Cold fog, ancient walls, tinny loudspeakers repeating everything in French, English, German, Japanese. Do you remember the other boat? The Zodiac, moored under the Pompadour, lashed against the wall below Notre Dame. A man stood in the boat, leaning back, pulling a bright blue nylon rope. People started watching him instead of the church. What was he pulling out of the water? What was the light rising up from below? It was another man, a man in a red wetsuit with yellow tanks strapped to his back, climbing the rope against the current. Do you remember that? They were still there. They waved me over. We have underground rivers in Kentucky, too. The Echo is famous in the caves. If I thought of it at the time, I would have tried to coax the boat into the caves when I'd floated past them and try to spot some Alice fish. In Paris, the underground river is the Bièvre. It enters the Seine right across from Notre Dame, but then it leaves it again. It's just a river crossing through another one, not joining it. I told the man on the boat that he didn't speak French in French. He shrugged. Maybe he didn't care. Maybe he didn't speak French either. He just pointed at the diver in the water, so I slipped over the side into the Seine. My boat seemed glad to be rid of me. The diver took me by the hand and led me down a very long way. He tied himself to a grating in the side of the stones that formed the channel there and showed me how he bent the bars wide enough for someone not wearing air tanks to slip through. So I did. I slipped through. Then up and out of the Seine. Or it might have been the Bièvre. I could have been in the secret river the whole time. Up and into a dank passage. I've been in dank passages in Paris before, but never any with so few bones. No skulls and thighs stacked along the walls here, just a dark stone hallway. I followed it and came to a junction, a place to choose, left or right. You remember my sense of direction. You wouldn't be surprised to know that I knew where I was, at the center of the Ile de la Cité. Left was north then, and I knew that it would take me beneath the police headquarters and up to Sainte-Chapelle, which Louis IX built to store the organs of Jesus after he bought them from one of the great salesmen of the 13th century. Right was south, to Notre Dame, where signs remind the pickpockets that God's eyes are on them. I stood there. I am standing there still. Other than the sign saying that God is particularly aware of petty larceny there, I only remember one thing from inside Notre Dame. You were so disgusted when we heard the woman with the Maine accent say, "They're praying." I didn't think this was a working church. There were jugglers outside. I didn't think it was a working church either. I didn't tell you that. When we went to Saint Chapelle together, we didn't go to look for the heart of Jesus. There was a concert, a half dozen stringed instruments, a candlelit cavern of stained glass. Bach? I don't remember. What I remember was leaving, walking out of the cathedral and into the rain. The line was slow because we had to pass through the checkpoints in the justice ministry which surrounds the church, gendarmes with Uzis below and gargoyles with sighs high above. I tracked a stream of rainwater from the mouth of a gargoyle to the pavement. I leaned out, turned up my head, opened my mouth. I told you that I didn't know what it tasted like limestone oil. I said limestone or ash, soot, smog. You smiled and said, "It tastes like gargoyles." You said that from my description. You didn't catch the rail in your tongue. A long way to come to choose between places I've already been. A long way to come to choose anything at all. I wonder if I can turn around. I wonder if I can find my way back to the boat. I wonder if it's still there. Thank you.
Raye Hendrix is an award-winning writer hailing from the rugged farmlands of northern Alabama. In addition to the 2021 chapbooks Fire Sermons, published by Ghost City Press, and Every Journal is a Plague Journal, published by Bottle Cap Press, she is the author of the debut full-length poetry collection, What Good is Heaven? Published by Texas Review Press as the Alabama selection for their Southern Poetry Breakthrough Series, and winner of the 2024 Weatherford Award for Best Appalachian Poetry, this collection is a blood-soaked love letter to place, to family, to the gritty reality that sometimes, as she writes in her poem, Animal Instinct, kindness means crush instead of heal. Hendrix's poetry is visceral. It's made up of bloody teeth and glass-splintered heels, but there is beauty to be found within that pain. Ever since I randomly opened her collection on the poem Fox Thaw, I haven't been able to get the red body hard with freeze from my head. Maybe we are all that fox on some level, icy on the roadside, waiting for spring to melt us into something new. Without any further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Raye Hendrix.
Hello. I'm a little bit short. That's why I wore my boots. Hi, y'all. Thank you so much for that. I don't know where you went. Oh, for that beautiful introduction. I love Bloody Love Letter. I think Blood-Soaked Love Letter. If I ever form a band, I think that's gonna be what it is. I'm not gonna talk too much because I'm actually not a great public speaker, despite being a teacher. I don't know how this happened. Not that many career paths for an English major, you know? I said, I wrote a book, and I was like, yeah, I love poetry, I love to write, I love to read. And then it got published, and my publisher was like, you have to read it out loud, right? And I was like, can we undo this? Can I go back? And he said no, and I said, okay, so here I am. And the last thing I'm gonna say is I'm really, really honored to be here. I didn't always conceive of myself as Appalachian. I just knew that I was Alabama mountain people. And it wasn't really until college that I started learning about, the ARC, which is, as we all know, flawed. But, and I got to start knowing, my best friend was from the coast of Alabama, and we just had such different realities. And then, I don't know, I just started learning about my history and my people, and I'm really, really proud to be an Alabamian and in the southernmost part of Appalachia and be welcomed into this space. It really is truly meaningful and really validating for me. So I'm going to stop talking and talk differently. This poem, I really would like to apologize to the vegans and vegetarians in the room. I did grow up in farm country, and there was a lot of animal death, and that is going to be in this book and the things that I'm reading. It's, to give you just a little bit of context, if you haven't read it, largely kind of mirroring the acceptable violences of farmland, of rural living, with the violence that often comes from religion and against women, against queer people. So kind of comparing these two marginalizations and kind of looking at the ways that violence gets enacted, and then also how we unwittingly participate in it sometimes. So I'm going to start with one of the first poems that I accidentally set my timer for 92 minutes. I'm not going to do that, I promise. I swear. I would rather die. Okay, it's back on 15. When I first wrote this poem, my professor whose class I wrote it for called it a primordial ooze poem, and since this is a book about coming of age, I wanted to do my own version of Appalachia's birth, or Alabamian Appalachia, my little corner of it anyway. So this poem is called Sink. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. No? Okay. Okay, I'll try harder. Is that better? Okay, cool. This poem is called Sink. Pine Mountain swells above the lake, and they name it Emerald, though in autumn I call it sunset, fire, the throats of 1,000 robins wheeling their color to the water's sparkling dark. What lives in the mountain's shadow becomes part of the mountain, pools in the valley like a child hidden in a womb not yet full enough to see. They name the water Emerald, and when it grows they dam it, section it in two, and call the new lake Jade. I call it Robin's Throat, Hawk Feather, Clay. The land here is low, and I am lower. Old men on mowers move through the valley like migrating beasts, reducing everything. I want my body to be small again, and smooth as the green algaed stones in mountain shadow at the bottom of the lake. That deep, even common things are lovely. The water's surface sifting sunlight into autumn, a new robin fire sky, the algaed rocks, green heavy gemstones I gather in my arms. That's that poem. Thank you. I appreciate that. Here comes the animal death. I'm really sorry. It happened a long time ago. They would be dead now anyway. I don't know if that's like a comfort or not. Sorry, I'm not good at this. All right. This poem is called Any Coyote. Any coyote. Like tongues of fire on the mountain, the red tails of fox squirrels flicker as they run from our presence. The crunch of my boots, chaotic joy of my large yellow dog who follows them like smoke. This morning, my father sent me out with a rifle. We're meant to be searching for something, but I can't remember what. The woods are like that. Dark spokes of evergreen wheel overhead to obscure all that lives beneath and above. Their needles sew away the sky. Behind us, an owl questions everything, and in the clear, cold air, the boulders, without their spring muffle of moss, repeat the inquiry. Today, even the wind won't whisper its guesses through the bare branches of trees less fortunate than pine. The long ghost of its body, quick and gray, a coyote wisps through the brush. My dog pursues it out of sight, returns with one of our missing chickens hanging broken from his jaw. Yes, that's right. My father sent us after the coyote, my dog to find and I to shoot it, while he repairs the plundered coop. The coyote, he said, by which he means any coyote. My dog leads me back to the coyote's den, a hole full of red feathers, gnawed bone, the old blue collar of someone's missing cat. No, I mean anyone's cat. The mountain doesn't know any of our names. Thank you. I have another sad animal poem. I'm really sorry. That's a lot of this book. This one's called Blood in the Milk. The calf slipped from her body like a receding wave. Breathless, limp, landed soft and heavy in the dew-wet grass the way a stone might after rolling slowly down a hill. A 9-month anticlimax. And if cows can mourn, its mother did. Wouldn't let us close enough to milk for days. Pink udder distending, swelling as if in place of empty womb. She wasn't mine, belonged to the old farmer who lived a mile around the bend, nestled in our shared bosom of hills. But I loved her as if she was, and the farmer let me, gave me a key to his barn, let my girlhood smell of shit and seed and hay. I walked there every day, freckles blooming like cow spots on my cheeks in the early heat of April, and maybe that's why she finally let me close. My body not much larger than her would-be calf's, arms and legs twiggy, pigtails like low red ears, my breed a mother's aggrieved mistake for bovine. The farmer gave me a milking stool and bucket, showed me how to work my hands, slow as springtime, gentle as a suckling mouth. I pulled, and when I did, she looked me in the eye. Thank you. I'm going to skip that one because it's another dead animal poem and come back to it if I need something else. This poem's called Sermon. I want to be clear, the grandfather mentioned it was very, very kind. He did have World War II PTSD, so everyone did think that he was really mean, but he actually wasn't. Anyway, this poem is called Sermon. Before the stroke, he wasn't cruel, just quiet. My grandfather, a dated Southern stoic. People thought him cold, and after he's the same, or almost. Sometimes the wrinkles rearrange his face into a smile. Sometimes he tries to tell me about God, how our souls will know each other in the after. He wants to make certain I understand there is an after worth behaving for, because he hasn't said as much, but I know he has always suspected I don't believe. When we ain't in the truck, the radio keeps on playing somewhere else, he tells me, doing his best to explain heaven. Thank you. So like I mentioned, this is finally moving on from dead animal poems momentarily. This book is a lot of queer and femme and non-binary-ish coming of age in rural Alabama, Appalachia. And something you should know is that I got a lot of food allergies, and the one thing that I don't have is a poison ivy allergy. Which is like, I feel like the one thing I get, you know? I'm allergic to peanuts, you know? It's like, I can't have Reese's. I heard they're good, so I get to not have poison ivy. So this poem is called Doves in the Ivy. 3 white-winged doves nest in the poison ivy patch my father has been asking me to cut down for weeks, since despite my body's other failings, I have not inherited the itch. I could lie down with them, the doves, so safe they must be women, which is unfair. My father is gentle and was raised by another gentle man, though I have seen them both go wild with rage in ways my mother never has. My father is a gentle man. He gave me my first shotgun, taught me how to shoot, to kill quickly, show mercy, and only when I must. The last time he hunted for sport, before I was a thought, he shot a squirrel, which his mother stuffed and mounted in her house where it stayed, collecting dust until the day she died because my father wouldn't have it in his home, couldn't look the creature in its imitation eyes, his guilt unbecoming of a Southern man. I wanted to be a Southern man, to love a Southern woman, feel guilt for nothing. Thank you. I have a few more. I think I have like 5 minutes left because I probably yapped a little too much at the beginning when I set it to 93 minutes. So this poem, there's not a lot of dark sky spots in Alabama, but grew up in the one that was probably the closest. So this is called The Darkest Place in Alabama. Milk splashed in a great black empty cauldron. The stars, so thick they embarrass the moon, seem to drip from the dark pale of the sky into the river, the pines, a silver lining to isolation, the loneliness of too much land with too few people in it. Godless in God's country, I count myself their kinfolk, those distant clustered suns, heaven's fiery queers that seem so close but never touch, glittering together and alone, spread beyond the reach of love. No blood, thick or otherwise to speak of, no resemblance, no relation, still I call them family, celestial cousins. But I am most like the stars in that I consume myself in absence. What is there to do in all that empty space but burn? Thank you. A lot of these poems are kind of short, so I'm going to read a couple more than I planned to. Not that many, I promise. But since you liked Foxtail, I'll read that one. I will say, I never talk about this, but that poem is like a self-portrait. I've literally never told anybody that, so now you all get to know that. It's not like a secret, I've just never talked about it. I obviously have red hair, and I was also born in January, and just some background for this, being born in January and then associating as a kind of farm country girl, winter with death and like fallow seasons, it sort of made me, it was sort of an early indicator for me that I was something different. I don't know if queerness was the word I would use yet, but that I was something unnatural, or which I don't obviously believe that, but that conception was unnatural, that like nobody's born in winter, cows aren't born in winter, and I was just like, how do I fit here? So need a little backstory for it now. This is Foxtail. The little fox, her red body hard with freeze, calls to me from the roadside at the near edge of spring. She asks me how long it takes a body to break down in the cold because she's tired of waiting. I admit I'm not sure. My own body, January born and icy, has been trying to pull apart for years. Thank you. I'll do the last two poems in the book, so I think that will be the last few minutes. So this is called Home. Home. The elusive dark, slow curve of a mother's spine, riverbank solid enough to stand, home a star-silver river of arms. My mother's river bend is subtle and soft, her arms wet firefly light. Home the far shore of her heart, and I the traveler boatless. A green fish rises from my mother's water, shows me how to take apart my bones, how to break and reposition them to make of me a boat. Ribcage hull, femur mast, scaffolding of tibia and spine. If I leak, I fill the gaps with teeth. The fish says if I use my skin for sails, I won't need my mother's body. Yes, I say, but who will brush my hair? Thank you. This is the last poem in the book, and it's also the title poem in the book, and I'll give you a little fun fact. The second I finished writing this poem, which is the only poem in the book that ever came out like almost fully formed, and one of the only poems that's ever happened for me I wasn't writing towards a book at that moment yet, and when I wrote this poem and like closed my notebook, I was like, this is where I'm going now. So it's really special to me, and I love ending on it, and that's why I ended the book on it too. So thanks for listening to me. This is What Good Is Heaven? When my mother dreamed of children, she pictured things in bowls. Beautiful fish gracing over brightly colored stones, clear water, a bowl of her favorite fruits, ceramic overflowing pears and tangerines, blueberries fat with sweet. I have always lived in secret, loved the dark water. I have always been the rough-pocked, bitter pit of peach. I remember being born, or at least the second time, when as a child I stumbled toddling down the steep gravel road, down off the sharp shoulder into a twisting bed of briar, and saw myself split open on the thorns, witnessed what till then had only been inside. Bee balm blossoms on my arms and knees, a secret my body well kept. Even then I tried to bury it, force self back into antonym of self. But dying is not the same as being unborn, and I've never been any good at either. Once it didn't rain for weeks, but I wanted to be a fish so badly, I jumped off our pier and broke both ankles in the drought-shallow shoals, and smiled that their new angles looked like fins. Once I watched my father stripping dry rotten wood from our porch, and as he pried up the boards, a family of possums hissed like bulbous vampires at the sunlight before they lit out for the edge of the woods, babies bobbing after mother like lures on a troubled lake. Everything is always looking for some new way to disappear. After the porch was fixed, I loosened a board and crawled inside, over and over, each time pretending I was crawling to the bottom of my mother's bowl of dream fruit, something soft and pitless each time I would emerge. In the dark, even the light sliding planks were as large as black eternal sky, beams signaling heaven or the break of dark water to surface, the sun-clear water of day. Even now, I am always searching for something to crawl into, some new way to be born. What good is heaven to me anyway? What good are fish and fruit and day? I'm still the child I always have been, hidden dark beneath the porch, pretending every nail hole is a star. Thank you.
What a wonderful reading this evening. So many themes weaving through all four of these pieces. Very beautiful. One more round of applause for all of our readers tonight. And thank you all. We'll be back here at 7 tomorrow night. Have a happy evening.